Recently, I feel like we've been drinking a lot of ryes that tend to be sweet, right? Where we're like, oh, it's a rye, but it tastes like brown sugar, and sweetness. Like this is spicy, spicy rye.
So tonight we're going to do a little tasting here and review of the Sherwood Pure Rye, the Sherbrook Unfiltered Straight Rye, and Mount Vernon Straight Rye Whiskey. So these are batches. I'm going to get the numbers backwards if I try to do this. So we've got batch 2 of the Sherwood, batch 3 of the Sherbrook, and batch 1 of the Mount Vernon.
That
These
is
are
correct.
ranging in proof from 108 to 110. So they're all right about the same. I mean, they're all 14 years old.
Pretty close.
They spent their first 12 years aging in Indiana and then moved on to spend 2 years aging in Maryland. And that is how we have these delivered here as Maryland Rye. So, I mean, I'm kind of excited to dig in. Did you want to go with the Mount Vernon first, you said?
Yeah, let's start with the Mount Vernon. I've got mine poured here. And like just to note, if you're buying rye whiskey, 14, 15-year rye is not super common, right? Like, we talk about 5, 6, 7-year being well aged. You might get lucky and overpay for an 8 or 9-year, but I'm pretty shocked we have 3 different 14-year-old barrel proof ryes in front of us, because this brings me back to the early days when you could just buy this stuff, and that's like back in 2015.
Right. I mean, this is right up in there in the source market of whiskey, meaning that these weren't produced by these brands. However, they are sold by these brands, sort of like Whistle Pig. I mean, they pulled the same card when they first launched. I mean, they're making a lot of their own stuff now, but they had originally launched by selling their sourced whiskey, which I actually really like. I'm a big fan of the Alberta Ryes.
Yeah.
So I think these should probably be pretty exciting maybe to the bourbon drinker a bit, but also to the seasoned rye drinker as well, just because of the big age, the depth of flavor, and how bold these are.
Yeah, if you like bold whiskey, if you've recently complained that the whiskey you had in your glass was meek or boring or kind of lifeless, like this should be for you. It's interesting that they're Maryland heritage ryes, but they're made in Indiana. The story behind that is that they're reviving old brands that used to be part of the Maryland rye portfolio. But, finished in Maryland, 2 years. I've got the Mount Vernon here. This is a spicy boy.
Yeah, it's got good layers of heat to it. So this is coming in at 108.2 proof, batch 1 of the Mount Vernon Straight Rye Whiskey. It's really dark on the nose. I like that. Yeah. It's got a good pile of oak to it.
Recently, I feel like we've been drinking a lot of ryes that tend to be sweet, right? Where we're like, oh, it's a rye, but it tastes like brown sugar, and sweetness. Like This is spicy, spicy rye.
Yeah, this brings in what I like to think of as like a good traditional core of just dark rye breads. I mean, there's like a little bit of a jamminess to the background there, but this is very, very obviously a good, strong, punchy rye.
Now, the question everyone's probably asking is, 14-year rye is hard to find. These were also not cheap. So they started at $200, and they only went up from that. I think it was $200 for the Mount Vernon, $250 for the Sherbrook, and $279 for the Sherwood Williams. So we'll keep that in mind. These are definitely spicy in more ways than one. But it's really nice. Like, this is
good rye is going to come with a high price. Part of that is also because rye doesn't need a ton of age to become great.
Right.
There are products out there. Wilderness Trail Rye comes to mind at 4 years. I honestly don't know if it needs to get any older. That's a very good product at a pretty rapid aging speed. So when you start talking about something this old, you get up into the layers of like crazy baking spices sometimes. Like if you've had Sazerac 18, it's just something that's like earthy and punchy and just like layered up with like anise and licorice. Like there's like a lot of things in there that you start to move out of standard whiskey tasting notes and into some like more extreme stuff, which is cool and fun to do, especially as a whiskey geek. But when you're kind of looking for like a down-to-earth rye, you do not need to reach for something that's going to cost $200. This is just a fun tasting that we want to host because we're sickos.
if someone walked up and said, "Hey, this is $200, you want to taste it?" I have a hard time finding a lot of people that would probably say like, "No,
Right.
no, thank you. Just pass that along. I'll take the $23 Sazerac instead." But overall, first Mount Vernon, really spicy, nice baking spice, lots of pepper, little light on the dill. It's not a big dilly pickle bomb, but just tons of maple and spice, and it's really rich and powerful. And it doesn't even drink that hot. Like
No.
for 59.
Yeah, this is very easy on the palate. Very, very almost dangerous, really.
Okay.
I think anything in that 105 to 110 proof range can be like sometimes deceptive, where you might be like, oh yeah, this has a little bit of kick to it. This might be a lower proof, lower as in like 93 to 98 proof.
Yeah.
When really it's punching about 10 points higher than that, and before you know it, your lips are numb.
And the rest of you is soon to follow. So
yeah, I really do dig the pepper layers that are going on in here. A little bit of crushed black pepper, and even like white pepper, like a little bit more pungent stuff going on. And I get it like a kind of a cool background here of maybe not necessarily maple, but sort of like a pancake syrup kind of note in there. That's like vague sweetness to balance it out.
Okay. I moved on to the Sherbrook, and I noticed kind of this like sweet tea note. I thought, it's kind of getting in that first sample, but it's sweet without being too syrupy. Kind of like a sweet tea, like a honey, light butterscotch. Like it seems like it's gotten a little sweeter, not too crazy.
All right, I'm gonna dig in. Oh yeah, it does come across a little bit brighter.
Yeah, this is also 14 years. This is the Sherbrook. This is another old Maryland label that's being resurrected.
Right, the Sherbrook Unfiltered Straight Rye.
Yeah, 14 years old. I mean, we're almost up in Sazerac 18 lane.
Yeah.
But it had a higher proof.
This strikes a drastically different chord than that style of whiskey, though.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's really nice. These are both spicy. Like I think there's just no getting around the way that they procured these barrels and blended them. These are meant to be spicy, flavorful, characteristic ryes.
Yeah. So earlier, I think I called them strong and punchy, and by that I didn't mean like an ethanol slap to the mouth.
Sure.
So this Sherbrook here is 109.7 proof. Again, it's not something that is coming through as like gasoline or feeling hot in any way at all. It's just something that has a ton of rye spice right up front, mingles with some other flavors in there as well. Like you said, you get some of these like slightly more candy-esque notes here on this.
Yeah.
Even like maybe a small touch of white fruit in there. But it's really just very rye driven in a super positive way.
I'm with you there. Rye driven in a positive way, I think is where I'm at so far with these. I do notice a little more dill on this guy. Like this is starting to remind me of some of those like really old MGP ryes, like maybe that Smooth Ambler was doing years ago. But I have a question for you. Is it wrong to put a $250 rye in a cocktail?
Absolutely not.
Okay. All right. Spicy.
Now, if you're only going to have one bottle on your bar, it probably shouldn't be a $250 bottle. You should hide that one and buy a few $30 bottles that, feather things out and maybe create a little bit of balance. But like we've always said, great ingredients make great cocktails. I kind of hate making cocktails, if I'm totally honest with you. I'm usually too lazy for it. Like one of my favorite cocktails is like 3 fingers of wild turkey in a glass. But if you're going to go so far as to make a cocktail, like you don't need to use a cheap or otherwise borderline undrinkable whiskey to do it. Like putting something great in your cocktail is only going to elevate it.
That's a good point. I guess if you have one bottle of this, 25 ounces, it's about, 18, 20 servings. Give it a shot in a cocktail. But, I just can't help but think like this might make the best Manhattan I might ever have in my life.
Oh, man. I do love Manhattans too. I love when somebody else makes them, especially.
I thought the Sherbrook was my favorite so far. So I'm curious if this will unseat it.
I like the Sherbrook too. I don't know if I could put one ahead of the other just yet. I like them both, but for different ways. And not to play the like I love all my children the same type of thing, but
right, we've heard that one before. But
a dash of like pine forest kind of thing going on in the Sherbrook that I really dig. which sometimes we fish out of these. I remember a barrel tasting that we did that we were selecting out of, I think, 8 different samples from barrel bourbon.
Oh, yeah.
And one of them was a 16-year rye that had this like really cool, earthy, piney thing going on. And I liked it so much that I actually asked our friend Will, who is he's not the barrel program manager now, but he's the chief innovation officer at Barrel Craft Spirits. I asked him, will you please let me know if somebody else buys this barrel? Because I want to track it down and buy a bottle of it because I think it's really cool rye.
Yeah, we probably should have led with that. But, every now and then John and I get randy and we just buy barrel. And when we buy whiskey by the barrel.
Correct.
Barrel isn't a serving size. But, every now and then we take one home for us.
Yeah. Yeah, we should touch on that here before we close out. But right now I'm into this Sherwood Rye here, and I'm kind of liking what's going on. I get a little bit more of that rock candy kind of sweeter background on this one than I do the others.
I'm loving this. This is great. Yeah, this is probably the sweetest of the 3, which I think really balances out how raw these spices are, like how punchy. Great color to it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is definitely the sweetest. I get that maple note. I get some almost like again, I come back to this almost every time with some of these ryes, is a rock candy kind of vibe to them.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely this is a little bit more leaning toward a bourbon drinker's style.
Okay.
Again, this is 110.4 proof, so like these aren't wildly different in proof.
Right.
But here, this batch 2 of the Sherwood Rye, the Sherwood Pure Rye, I should say, is man, this is hitting definitely noticeably different than the Mount Vernon. These are kind of steering 2 different directions.
Yeah, and it is worth noting too that the producers, so Maryland Heritage Rye, the bottler for this, they took a variety of barrels and blended 3 different batches. So it's not like they made one huge vat and they split it into 3 and they just slapped 3 different labels on it for collectability, or the Pokemon, like, gotta catch them all. Like, these were blended to 3 different profiles. So it's really no surprise that these taste pretty different because they're supposed to, which is nice.
Yeah, this one has the highest level of fruit in there for me.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of that fruit cocktail syrup kind of background note.
Ooh, yeah, good call. This is like, dole syrup and baking spice all day.
Yeah. It has that great rye character to it too. This is very enjoyable whiskey.
Yeah, this is definitely, I'll just go ahead and call it, this is my favorite one to drink neat. I would love to taste Sherbrook in a cocktail. I think it would be bold there. A little spicy for me. The Mount Vernon, a little oaky for me, a little dry. I think that this is the most well-rounded of the 3, and honestly, it's delicious. Like, this is. Of course, it's the most expensive of the 3, but I would pay it. Like, this.
Yeah.
This is good whiskey.
Absolutely the most rounded, the most balanced, and I feel like it kind of has the most going on too. And probably that's just because it isn't necessarily, and I really hate to call the Mount Vernon 2-dimensional because it's not. I mean, it does have a lot of great things going on and it's got awesome character.
Right.
But when you compare it directly to this Sherwood, which has a much more rounded vibe to it, there's just like layers of sweetness in there that work well with the spice. There's layers of fruit that kind of complement this baking spice notes. And I think overall it's really something that I wish I could drink a little bit more frequently. But I mean, at that price point, it's definitely something that you might want to hold on to and bust out on a special Friday night, or for an occasion, you got somebody over and you really want to show them something cool. It's a really cool bottle for that.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm in agreement with you. Kicking off on a great note. It's very rare that we put 3 whiskeys in front of us and we have to, kind of split hairs to figure out which is the best of the 3, right? Like, our job is typically like, oh, okay, this one's not so good. I didn't enjoy this one, but this one's great. These are 3 great whiskeys, no matter what you like. And honestly, it comes down to splitting hairs. Like, I would drink any of these any day, but I think the Sherwood is definitely the standout for me.
Yeah, and even more surprising, really, is that we sort of agreed on all 3 of these, where usually
that is rare.
A very firm line in the sand is the level of oak to something where it's usually almost impossible to put too much oak in it for me, and quite the opposite for you. And I think in this one, we both kind of leaned toward the, I don't want to say softer, but the more rounded and with a touch more sweetness to it profile, which is not something that usually happens. It reminds me a little bit about something that I was hoping that we would talk about here at the end of the episode, but the Eagle Rare selection that we did back in May, where we
Oh,
were
yeah.
sort of divided on the profiles of two of the samples that we were going through. Two of the barrels were noticeably sweeter than the others.
Yep.
And two were leaning in a way that I think is a little bit more of a Stag Junior profile, a little bit more vanilla, chewier oak, darker character overall. And as soon as I tasted through those, I was like, I already know which ones of these Jay wants. And it's because I know which ones I want. So,
not saying I'm predictable, but sometimes I am fairly
I think
predictable.
we both kind of are in that aspect, which isn't bad. I mean, we know what we like and we know what each other like, so it makes some of these things a little bit easier. I could almost pick barrels for you, going by the fact that I would prefer the other barrel if there's more oak in one than the other.
Yeah, I mean, and that was a fun trip, man. Like, we were in town for the Derby. We hit up Buffalo Trace. We had our wives with us. I think the worst part of that was that my wife agreed with you. Like, I was just alone on an island, like voting for the sweet fruity guy while everyone went for the oaky dry monster. But man, that was a fantastic
I don't know as I would call it a oaky dry monster, but it was certainly delicious.
I mean, I've never been dramatic before. I don't know.
Okay, that's fair.
I would say that.
You know what? I'll allow it. Just this one time. And that's another good thing that we could tease there is that barrel is going to be coming up here soon. And we're going to be offering that to folks that have joined our Patreon community as well. And I think that'll probably tie in nicely to a quick plug for our Discord server. So we can get some folks in there, continue the conversation, talk whiskey, maybe trade some samples, and everybody can kind of hang out and have a good time in a platform that makes it super easy to stay connected.
Yeah, definitely. If you like Eagle Rare tenure, if you don't know what Eagle Rare is, if you used to be able to buy it and can no longer buy it and wish you had some access to it, yeah, go ahead and join us over in Discord, the Whiskey Net. John and I are both there every day. It's a good way to kind of catch up with us between the shows. We're posting articles from both of our sites. We're posting, kind of insight and reviews as things happen. So go ahead and check us out there.